Welcome back to my channel. I'm Traben, and in today's video, we're going to be doing a review for Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. Welcome back to my channel. This is Traben's Tomes. I am Traben. These are my tomes. Let's talk about them today. I'm not going to bury the lead here. I think Anxious People is probably the best thing I've read so far this year, but I don't think everyone's going to agree with me. Anxious People is a difficult book to describe without giving too much away, because it is at its core a mystery book in the sense that there's some central element that they're not telling you that gets revealed far into this book that really matters in figuring out what's happening in this situation. This is a story about a bank robbery that's not a bank robbery, and that leads to a hostage situation that really isn't a hostage situation. And that sounds absolutely absurd, and I think that the author of the book would probably agree with you. The early chapters talk about, I think the very opening actually might talk about, this is a book about idiots. One of the very first lines in the book is, this is a story about a lot of things, but it's mostly about idiots. And it's just, again, it's so hard to describe this book without ruining it. So there's a person who tries to rob a cashless bank. That's why it's not really a robbery. One of the many reasons why it's not really a robbery. And the police are called and they try to flee. The only place they can find themselves in is a apartment viewing. And so they kind of accidentally hold all those people hostage, but they really aren't. They really don't want to hurt anybody. And it's just like a comedy of errors with that premise. Now, I'm going to call this a mystery book because you continue reading because so much is being obscured from you about what's actually occurring. The prose and the narrator are a big part of that. This is a book that is written in that third-person omniscient storytelling style, but the narrator is effectively a character in the story because they have such an interesting and impactful voice in the way the story is being told. It kind of reminds me a little bit, actually, of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in the sense that there are these like random asides, and the way the story is told feels at first so directionless and so stream of consciousness that it's hard to peg down what's really going on, especially early on in the book. But as it continues, you start seeing the connection between these individuals, all these people at the viewing, and the police officers that are investigating it, and the private lives of the people in that room, and how they're all interconnected to tell this much larger story. I think the biggest barrier to entry here is honestly going to be the prose. I loved it. But I think the best way to kind of decide if this is for you, I think the fastest way would just be to read you a chapter, because these chapters are wildly incongruous. This chapter is 4 paragraphs long, and I think in hearing this excerpt, you will be able to make a more informed decision on whether or not this is something for you. So this is chapter 2. 10 years ago, a man was standing on a bridge. This story isn't about that man, so you don't really need to think about him right now. Well, obviously you can't help thinking about him. It's like saying, don't think about cookies, and now you're thinking about cookies. Don't think about cookies. All you need to know is that a man was standing on a bridge 10 years ago, upon the railing, high above the water, at the end of his life. Don't think about that anymore. Think about something nicer. Think about cookies. This style, this stream of consciousness writing was fun for me. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was entertaining. The chapters, again, range in length, so sometimes you'll get those very short chapters and you'll just be like, okay, one more. It pushes you to learn more. It does this thing that another book I was reading last year was doing. It was like Fish Dappled in Sunlight. I'll put it up here. It was a Japanese title, and at the end of every chapter, it would say something absolutely wild and insane. So, like, chapter 1 would end, and they'd be like, talking about sitting down with this person and having a chat, and then the very last line was like, he couldn't wait until she was dead. And you'd be like, what? Why? And then you'd want to read the next chapter. I feel like Anxious People does this as well, but like funny and good. It's where each chapter winds up with like just a little bit more helping of like, why was that bridge important? Or like, how is this person connected to this other person? Or why does this random detail I gave you forever ago matter? It all culminates in a story that, one, is a really fun mystery, a fun story, silly, ridiculous, like you kind of have to turn your brain off at a couple points, but it works just fine. But also reaches some rather poignant themes toward the end that actually do end up working because the characters in here feel so human. They feel like goofy, stupid humans, but they feel very real, and their little eccentricities just feel like actual quirks that people would have. You get a good sense of their desires and their frustrations and their anxieties as you read through the book. So that I feel like when it does get to like the lesson of the book and like the takeaways that you're supposed to have, they do actually hit harder than they might have otherwise. And I think it's a really difficult thing that Backman was able to pull off here, in that there are so many characters in this book and they all feel distinct from one another, and they all, you get a good arc for so many of them, and it culminates in such a clean ending that it's really remarkable what the author was able to accomplish in writing this book. And it was funny and entertaining the whole way. So yeah, again, I think with this one, the prose and that kind of rambling narration style, I think is going to be the biggest barrier to entry. Another caveat I will say is early on, a number of the characters really come off as insufferable and like bad people. But I think one of the core ideas of the book is that we all have these tendencies, these personas that we present to others, these outwardly projections, and it's really more about what leads us to behave that way and what leads us to act that way that's important. But we can't get to that point without learning about somebody. And I think the book is about learning about those people, and both within the narrative of all these characters learning about each other, and for you, the reader, going through this, I think it really does illustrate that point remarkably well. I gave Anxious People 5 out of 5. Again, I think it's probably the best thing I've read so far this year. Not only does it have excellent characterization among a very wide cast, it is perfectly crafted mystery, not like a whodunit kind of thing, but you are led forward throughout the narrative via getting the answers to the questions of what happens in this situation. I also feel like just narratively everything came together so well, and it's really mind-boggling to think of all the little details and the little quirks and things that this author had to work out amid all these characters to arrive at the conclusion they did. That's so clean but doesn't feel too contrived. Like it does, it feels a little contrived, but that's the fun of it. And like obviously like you have to buy into that a little bit if you're down with this prose, that this is going to be a little silly. So it was a little silly, but it was also a lot poignant, and I think that it was just a really good book, and you should read it. Thanks again for coming by and listening to my ramblings on books. I hope your reading journey is going well. I hope you're finding things that strike a chord with you and that are fun and entertaining, but also insightful. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so we can grow this corner of our BookTube community. And until the next one, take care.